February 19th, 1943. A ridge of shattered stone overlooking the Fide Pass, Tunisia. The air is bitter, smelling of cold iron and the dry, ancient dust of the Kasserine region. The sun is a pale smear in the east, offering no warmth, only a harsh light that exposes the men of the 1st Armored Division. They are not veterans. They are green, terrified, and about to meet the full fury of Rommel's Afrika Korps. Private David Miller, 19 years old, shivers, but not just from the cold. His knuckles are white where he grips the new M1 rocket launcher. The men call it the Bazooka. It's a simple steel tube, painted olive drab, loaded with a 236-inch M6 heat rocket. It is their miracle weapon, the tank killer promised in training films back in the States. Miller and his loader, Corporal Chen, lie flat behind a meager pile of rocks. Their breathing is ragged, visible as steam in the dawn air. Below them, the valley is quiet, too quiet. The Stuka dive bombers, the screaming Jerrys, have finished their work, leaving behind a landscape of burning half-tracks and stunned survivors. Now, silence reigns, heavy and absolute. Then, a new sound, a low guttural rumble that seems to come from the earth itself. It is not the familiar cough of a truck engine or the clatter of a light Panzer II. This is a vibration that travels through the rock, into Miller's bones. Sergeant Riley, his face a mask of dried sweat and grit, puts his field glasses to his eyes. He scans the haze at the mouth of the pass. "There," he whispers. The word is flat, dead. Miller squints. At first it is just a shape, a boxy shadow moving through the dust. Then it resolves. It is a Panzerkampfwagen SIG, the Tiger. It is immense. Unlike the tanks they trained against, this machine seems alien. Its armor is flat, thick, and arrogant. The long 88mm cannon, a gun they have learned to fear from its anti-aircraft variant, swivels slowly, sniffing the air for targets. It is not moving fast, but it moves with an unstoppable, grinding momentum. More appear, 3 of them. They are ignoring the American 37mm anti-tank guns, which bark uselessly, their shells striking the Panzer's frontal plate and ricocheting like pebbles. "Miller," Riley says, his voice strained. "You're up, you and Chen. Wait till it turns, aim for the side, the engine." But the Tiger doesn't turn. It advances straight on, a predator that fears nothing. It is 150 yards out. "Now, Miller, hit it!" Chen taps Miller's helmet, the signal the rocket is armed. Miller plants the bazooka's brace against his shoulder, aims center mass, and squeezes the trigger. There is a whoosh, a backblast of smoke and sand that stings Chen's face. The rocket screams across the gap, a perfect shot. It strikes the Tiger's frontal glacis plate, a bright, sharp flash of orange. The men cheer for a half-second, but the cheer dies in their throats. The smoke clears. The Tiger is untouched. It hasn't even slowed down. A dark smudge, like a burn mark, is the only evidence of the hit. The M6 rocket, with its shaped charge, was designed to penetrate 3 inches of steel. The Tiger's front armor is over 4 inches thick. The rocket splashed against it, a futile gesture. On the lead tank, the commander's hatch opens. A man in a black uniform peers out, annoyed as if swatting a fly. Then the tank's main gun fires. The sound is not a boom. It is a physical crack that splits the air. The shell lands exactly where the 37mm gun crew was positioned, vaporizing the men and their weapon. The Tiger's turret begins to turn toward Miller's position. It bounced, Miller stammers, his mind unable to process the failure. Riley screams, "Get down, get—" The world dissolves. The rock pulverizer, the 80-millimeter shell, annihilates their foxhole, their sergeant, and their miracle weapon. Miles away in a field hospital, a wounded survivor dictates a report that will chill the blood of Allied command. Bazooka, ineffective against new German armor. The weapon that was supposed to save them is a failure. What no one knew was that this moment would change the war forever. The failure at Kasserine Pass is not an anomaly, it is a terrifying preview. As 1943 bleeds into 1944, the German Panzerwaffe introduces armor that seems indestructible. The Tiger Weim is just the beginning. The Panther tank debuts with 120 millimeters of perfectly sloped frontal armor, and the Tiger II, or King Tiger, enters the battlefield as a 70-ton mobile fortress. Allied infantry weapons are suddenly tragically obsolete. The reports flooding into U.S. Army ordnance at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland paint a picture of total helplessness. The standard 37mm anti-tank gun is mocked by tank crews as the pea-shooter. They are told to knock 3 times on the armor and hand the Germans a grenade. The British Piat is cumbersome and has a brutally short range, and the American M1 Bazooka, the weapon that held so much promise, is proving a deep disappointment. The problem is one of physics. The M6 rocket used the shaped charge, or heat, high-explosive anti-tank principle. This wasn't about kinetic energy, like a solid bullet. It used the Monroe effect. When the rocket hit, a cone-shaped liner inside the warhead, usually made of copper, was flash-forged by the explosion into a superheated, needle-thin jet of molten metal. This jet traveled at over 25,000 feet per second, theoretically capable of slicing through steel plate, regardless of the rocket's velocity. But the theory was failing in practice. The M6 rocket's 36-inch 60mm warhead was simply not potent enough. Its small cone and explosive charge could not generate a jet with enough mass and velocity to defeat the new, thick, high-quality German plate steel. Furthermore, the physics of the jet were incredibly sensitive. The standoff distance, the exact space between the base of the cone and the target armor at the moment of detonation, had to be perfect for the jet to properly form and focus. The M6's fuse and nose cone were designed for older, thinner armor. Against the Panther's sloped glacis, the rocket would often detonate at a bad angle or at the wrong distance, causing the jet to splash harmlessly on the surface. For the infantryman on the ground, this meant he had to get suicidally close to a tank, aim for a weak spot, a track, a vision slit, the rear engine grille, and pray. More often than not, he would be cut down by machine gun fire before he could even get into position. The psychological impact is devastating. American GIs, landing in Normandy, face an enemy whose armor they cannot kill. Sherman tanks, known as Ronsons, they light the first time, are being brewed up by Panthers they can't even scratch from the front. The infantry, tasked with protecting the Sherman's flanks, are armed with weapons that don't work. Ordnance scrambles. They try packing more explosive into the M6 rocket. The result is a heavier rocket with more recoil, but no significant increase in penetration. They try different liner materials. They try different explosives. Nothing works. The constraints seem absolute. The bazooka tube is 36 inches. A bigger rocket would require a bigger, heavier launcher, which the infantry can't carry. The GIs are desperate. In the field, They begin strapping 2 or 3 captured German mines to a plank of wood and trying to shove it into a tank's tracks, a suicide mission. The brass at Aberdeen, facing pressure from General Eisenhower himself, are grim. They need a miracle, but their engineers, brilliant men bound by conventional thinking, are stumped. They are trying to make the existing weapon marginally better. But the problem isn't marginal. The problem is fundamental. The war is being lost in the hedgerows of France because of a failure in physics. Experts agreed it could not be done. The man who will solve the problem is not a soldier. He is not a weapons engineer at Aberdeen. He is Dr. Aris Thorne, a theoretical physicist and part-time lecturer at a small, unassuming college in Pennsylvania. Thorne is a Swiss immigrant, a man who fled Europe in 1939, leaving behind a continent that was tearing itself apart. He is brilliant, eccentric, and utterly impatient with military bureaucracy. His colleagues call him the mad teacher, because he lectures with a frantic energy, his suit perpetually covered in chalk dust, his mind visibly working several steps ahead of everyone in the room. He's obsessed with a niche field, fluid dynamics, specifically the bizarre behavior of solid materials under pressures so extreme they begin to behave like liquids. He sees the universe not as a collection of objects, but as a series of flowing, interacting forces. He is, in short, the only man in America who sees the bazooka problem for what it is, not a failure of explosives, but a failure of geometry. Thorne has no security clearance. He reads about the Kasserine Pass failures in Life magazine. He sees the grainy photos of knocked-out American tanks. He reads the sanitized reports, but he reads between the lines. He knows about the work of his fellow countryman Henry Mohaupt, who pioneered the shaped charge. He knows the math. And he knows the US military is getting it wrong. He writes letters. They go unanswered. He tries to contact the Ordnance Board. He is dismissed as a civilian, a teacher with no practical experience. Frustrated, he pulls a string. A former student of his, a young, bright-eyed engineer named Frank Bellows, now works in the bowels of the Aberdeen Proving Ground, running quality control tests. Thorne calls him not as a professor, but as a desperate man. "Frank," he says over the crackling phone line, "they are using the wrong shape. The Monroe effect is not a hammer, it is a needle. They are trying to hit the tank with the handle of the needle." Bellows, terrified of being overheard, arranges to meet Thorne off base. In a dim diner, Thorne unrolls a series of complex diagrams drawn on drafting paper. The military's M6 rocket uses a simple 40-degree conical liner. It's easy to mass-produce. It's also, Thorne explains, hydrodynamically inefficient. The jet it creates is dirty, dispersing its energy too quickly. "Look," Thorne says, tapping the paper. "They see the cone. I see the focusing lens. What if the cone is not a cone at all? What if it is parabolic or hemispherical? What if we add a wave shaper to the explosive charge itself to guide the detonation wave around the liner, compressing it inward perfectly before it ever starts to move?" He scrawls equations on a napkin. Bellows is stunned. The math is theoretical, but it's sound. Thorne's calculations suggest that with a perfectly shaped liner, a precision charge, they could double, perhaps triple, the penetration, using the exact same amount of explosive and the same too. 36-inch diameter. It would be a ghost inside the machine. Frank warns him, "Doctor, the colonels, they don't like outsiders. They trust their own tests. This is impossible." Thorne looks up from the napkin, his eyes blazing with a cold fire. "Impossible? is just a word for physics you haven't understood yet. The boys in those hedgerows don't have time for impossible. Get me the components, Frank. We will build it ourselves. Frank Bellows is a good engineer, but a nervous conspirator. He knows what he is doing is at best a career-ending breach of protocol and at worst treason. Borrowing restricted components from the Aberdeen arsenal during wartime is not something they teach in basic training, but Thorne's conviction is absolute, and Frank has seen the casualty reports. He smuggles out the parts: inert M6 rocket casings, copper sheeting for the liners, and blocks of Composition B, the explosive fill. They set up a workshop in the cellar of a rented farmhouse miles from the base, a prohibited test in the truest sense. Thorne, the man of theory, proves to be a surprisingly deft machinist. He carefully hammers the copper sheets into a precise, tulip-like hemispherical shape, checking the tolerances with calipers, muttering to himself in a mix of German and English. Frank modifies the rocket casings. Their first attempt is crude, but it matches Thorne's blackboard equations. They take their creation to a remote quarry, setting up a 4-inch thick steel plate salvaged from a captured Tiger tank, a plate that has shrugged off every standard M6 rocket fired at it. Frank wires the detonator. They crouch behind a pile of boulders. "Fire," Thorne whispers. Frank hits the plunger. The explosion is sharp. They wait for the smoke to clear, their ears ringing. They walk to the target. Failure. The rocket detonated, but the plate is merely scorched. A deep black crater melted into the surface, but no penetration. Frank's heart sinks. "We failed, Doctor. They'll court-martial me for this." Thorne, however, is not looking at the crater. He's looking at the splash pattern. He is ecstatic. "Frank, you magnificent boy, don't you see? It's out of focus." He points. "The jet. It formed too early. My new shape creates the jet faster and further back. The rocket's nose cone is too short. The jet is fully formed before it even reaches the armor, so it disperses. We don't need a better charge. We just need space." They return to the cellar. This time, the modification is laughable. They take another modified rocket and weld a simple, empty tin can to the front. It's a crude, hollow extension that serves as a standoff probe. It looks ridiculous, like a child's toy. Frank calls it the dunce cap. They return to the quarry. They set up a fresh 4-inch plate. They stand behind the rocks. Frank hits the plunger. This time, the sound is completely different. It is not the boom of an explosion. It is a violent, high-pitched crack, like a giant's whip. The air smells of ozone. They walk forward. Frank stops dead. Thorne grins, a wild, mad grin. The 4-inch plate is punctured, but punctured is the wrong word. A perfectly neat, pencil-sized hole is drilled clean through the armor. On the other side, a spray of molten steel is embedded in the rock face 20 feet behind it. The dunce cap round, with its absurd tin can and the same explosive charge as the M6, has defeated the Tiger's armor. Thorne begins to laugh, a wild, cackling sound that echoes off the quarry walls. "Frank!" he shouts. "Find me something thicker." If you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button. They are discovered. A routine patrol investigating the unexplained explosions in the quarry follows their tracks back to the farmhouse. 2 MPs, guns drawn, kick in the cellar door to find a disheveled professor and a pale-faced junior engineer standing over a table littered with rocket parts and welding equipment. Within an hour, they are in the office of Colonel Magnus Hess, the base commandant. Hess is a man made of right angles and pure, undiluted rage. On his desk are the schematics for the dunce cap round, which he holds between two fingers as if it's contaminated. "What you have done here, Dr. Thorne," Hess snarls, "is espionage. You, Bellows, have stolen government property. You have violated 17 articles of the Uniform Code. You are amateurs." Frank Bellows looks at the floor, expecting to be shot. Dr. Thorne, however, is furious. He is covered in soot, his hair is wild, and he slams his chalk-dusted hands on the Colonel's pristine desk. "Amateurs, your professionals are failing. Your engineers are stuck. They are sending boys to their graves with pea shooters. I have in this cellar built a rocket that can kill a Tiger tank. You call me an amateur? You call me a spy? I am the man who is saving you." Hess is taken aback by the sheer audacity. He looks at the dunce cap prototype. This can... You think this joke is the answer? "It is not a joke," Thorne says, his voice low and dangerous. "It is physics. It is the correct standoff distance for a hydrodynamically optimized charge. Give me 1 hour. Give me your toughest target." Hess looks at the man. He sees the madness, but he also sees the equations Thorne has scrawled on the back of a requisition form. Hess has seen those equations before in classified reports from German scientists. He makes a decision. "Fine, Professor. You want a test? You'll get one." He doesn't take them to the quarry. He takes them to Range 10, the graveyard, where they keep captured enemy armor. They wheel out a section of frontal armor from a Panther tank. 120 mitten, sloped at 55 degrees. It is the single hardest target the Allies have. Nothing, not even the 90mm tank gun, can reliably penetrate it. Hess's team of engineers, the same men who dismissed Thorne, are assembled, smirking. Thorne and Frank load their last dunce cap round into a standard M1 launcher. Thorne, refusing to let anyone else do it, shoulders the weapon himself. He aims. He fires. Crack! The sound is deafening. The engineers walk up to the plate, expecting another splash mark. They stop. Silence. One of them reaches out a trembling finger. The tin can rocket, fired by the mad teacher, has drilled a hole clean through the invincible armor. Hess stares at the tiny, perfect circle of daylight. He walks back to Thorne, who is calmly brushing dust off his suit. The Colonel doesn't say a word. He simply takes a jeep, drives to his office, and picks up the red telephone that connects him directly to the Pentagon. "Get me General Marshall," he barks, "and get me every engineer on this base. They're taking a lesson from a teacher." The M6A3 rocket, based exactly on Thorne's dunce cap design, is ordered into mass production. The validation is absolute. The new round is designated M6A3. It retains the two 36-inch diameter, but the warhead is completely new. It features Dr. Thorne's hemispherical copper liner and a new elongated hollow nose cone that provides the perfect standoff distance. The GIs don't know the physics. They just know it works. The new rockets arrive in Europe just in time for the darkest days of the Allied advance, the Battle of the Bulge, December 1944, Bastogne. The 101st Airborne is surrounded, freezing and low on ammunition. They are holding the line against the elite 2nd Panzer Division. A massive Panther tank, whitewashed for camouflage, rumbles out of the fog, its machine guns spitting fire at the American foxholes. 2 paratroopers, a team from Easy Company, crouch in a snow-filled ditch. They load their bazooka, but this time it's not the M6. It's the M6A3. "Hit 'em," the squad leader whispers. The gunner fires. The rocket streaks through the freezing air. It strikes the Panther's thick frontal glacis. The crack is sharp. The tank, which had seemed so unstoppable, lurches and stops dead. A wisp of black smoke curls from the tiny hole in its armor. A second later, a horrific whoomp rips the turret clean off the chassis as the tank's own ammunition cooks off inside. The invincible armor is broken. The impact is immediate and profound. German tank commanders, who once advanced with impunity, now grow cautious. They are terrified of the American infantry, who can suddenly kill them from the front. The bazooka, once a weapon of last resort, becomes a primary hunting tool. Dr. Aris Thorne's invention saves countless Allied lives and thousands of Sherman tanks. His mad idea, born in a college cellar, has shifted the balance of power on the ground. And what of the hero? Thorne receives no medal. There is no parade. His work is classified secret. He is forced to sign his patents and designs over to the U.S. government for a symbolic $1, a common practice for wartime contributions. He is thanked politely by Colonel Hess and sent back to Pennsylvania. He goes back to teaching. His students never know that the eccentric man in the chalk-covered suit, lecturing them about fluid dynamics, is the man who single-handedly gave the GI the power to kill a tiger. His legacy, however, is etched in steel. The principle of the precision-shaped charge becomes the foundation for every modern anti-tank weapon, from the post-war super bazooka to the M72 law, the RPG-7, the Tau and the Javelin missile. Every time an infantryman defeats a tank, he owes a debt to the mad teacher. His name is forgotten, buried in the archives, but his genius remains the shield of the infantry. What other forgotten stories of courage should we tell? Comment below.